3. Go. We're live, and welcome back everyone to another AI Journal LinkedIn live session. Today I am joined by Matthias and Leslie. Matthias is joining us from Exasol and Leslie is joining us from TurinTech. This is the first time we've actually done this. I'm very excited where we've had two companies on at the same time. So this can be a little test to see how we work out. But as always, we do these to bring you the maximum value and to learn from the best of the people that are doing this kind of work. So Matthias, Leslie, brilliant to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Tom.
Hey, thank you very much, Tom. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm very excited. It's there's a lot of things that we're going to be looking at today. So we're going to be looking at challenges of data and what data professionals are hitting. We can look at high performance analytics, which I think will be a really interesting point, and a load of things around code optimization for machine learning. So quite a techie one, which quite excites me because when these kind of conversations happen, I get to learn the most, quite selfishly. But as well, the audience can join us and the audience can join in. So anyone joining us, hope you enjoy this session. But I guess to kick us off, Leslie, I'd like to come to you first, sir. Maybe we can both, each of you, Matthias and Leslie, can give a bit of a background of what your story's been, what your journey with your companies have been, and your kind of background. And what I always want to know, what's your passion that led you into the role you're in now? So Leslie, starting with you, and then over to you, Matthias.
Yeah, sure. So basically, what led for myself is my background is in mathematics, graph theory, combinatorics, and artificial intelligence all wrapped up into one. And I went to work within the financial services industry, and I saw a lot of potential use cases where the future was going to be more involving AI, especially in the model building process and especially in analytics. And that led to naturally TurinTech, which is like, can we solve all these problems and how do we solve them efficiently? And that's where we are.
Nice, I love that. And what was it that, can I just ask, what was it that got you into it, Leslie? What got you into this kind of field of work? Because people always ask me, and I say chance. I don't know if there's something that got you into it, but I'd love to know that as well. Thank you, Matthias.
Yeah, no, I think I'd love to say chance. I think it was more research. I love doing research, and we started to work on some fundamental areas of code optimization. And then we realized that actually we can use a lot of artificial intelligence to do this. And my interest from research kept moving up. And as we started doing papers and working with and collaborating with a lot of different people, individuals, much like Matthias and others, we started to see, oh, wow, this could be something that could be big. And that's what really dropped me into the space where I said, I want to be part of this and I want to be at the cutting edge.
Nice. Love that. What about you, Matthias?
Which is a great transition because talking about cutting edge, 18 years ago, I joined Exasol, the analytics database vendor. I remember very well after my computer science degree, I joined as a software developer and I was in the interview process and completely blown away that a small startup in Germany is trying to be a relational database management system and fighting against the Oracles and Teradata's and Microsofts. And they had a big vision of how to turn parallel software code into very smart database software and revolutionize the market on that analytics front end. And it's been a really interesting 2 decades now. So 18 years in the company and really exciting times. And every year it's getting more exciting, to be honest, because data becomes more important, right?
Yeah, 100%. So to build off that data, I always hear how important it is and making sure it's structured. And it's like, you can't use AI if you don't have data, as a conversation I sometimes hear, and how viable it will be. And I mean, there's all these routes before you even start implementing. Make sure your house is in order. It's like the common saying, make sure you make your bed in the morning. I look at it as like, make sure your data's clean in the morning, something like that, to make sure that you can really get the best from the results you want. So maybe you can give me a bit of a background, the audience, a bit of a background. So Leslie, start with you, then Matthias. So what way, or maybe Matthias, let's start with you actually. What way is it that an introduction to what Exasol does? How are you using data? How are you solving challenges? And what is it that you're really doing with this high technology and filtering all that? Give me a bit of an overview.
So Exasol is a relational database management system. You can compare it to an Oracle, like with a SQL interface, right? And what we did, our founders were researching on MPP, so massively parallel processing and in-memory computing. And what we did, We created a system from scratch, which is much faster, much more scalable, applying columnar storage for analytical queries. That's the best way of storing data, right? And through that architecture, we can accelerate queries by factor 50 or 100 without any question. And I think that is our key value proposition. It's all about performance, and speed. And today, with large amounts of data volumes, right, speed is very important. It's not just about a query response time and real-time analytics. It's really about various dimensions of letting more people accessing the database, analyzing more amounts of data, or asking more complex questions to the data. Relational database world is kind of the opposite of data science or AI in a certain way, because the data scientists often work in their labs, right, and on unstructured data on data lakes, and Leslie can talk much more sophisticated about that. But we have integrated data science into our relational database management system a couple of years ago. It's an open framework which allows actually to install any data science language, and then you can combine a relational database management system through UDFs with AI and ML algorithms. So what you can do, you train your model, and you can use a tool like TurinTech. Leslie will explain that later. And then the resulting statistical model can be uploaded to the in-memory engine in Exasol. So you combine actually the power of AI with the structured data of a data warehouse.
Awesome. And just quickly on that, I want to hear all about it, Leslie, but remind me, you made a very good point to the audience and to both of you as well, if you've never read it. I'm reading a book at the moment, Super Fast Speed to Lead, and it is absolutely blowing my mind, like the things they come up with, and it just shows how being fast, being quick, whether it's with data or whatever industry you're in, whether you're not really a tech person, just how much it has. And I mean, you always look at the classic figure of how quickly TikTok. I've never used TikTok. To me, I feel like I'd go on one reel and I'd be lost in there for 12 hours. But that just shows how quickly it's moving and how important, to your point, Matthias. But yeah, recommend that book. Leslie, want to hear all about what you're doing as well, sir?
Yeah, sure. So we're on the other side of the spectrum. So interestingly enough, we're sat in the AI space, firmly within the data science realm. And I think in particular with what TurinTech does is that we set out to solve a problem using code optimization for machine learning specifically. We actually use machine learning techniques within code optimization. And the idea is to use this to help generate more efficient models by making it possible to generate more efficient code. And as Matthias had mentioned as well, we've been able to perform these functions in particular within database for companies much like Exasol. So what we see now is that there is a trend within the space where a lot of people are building a lot of models, and they want to be able to deploy those models very quickly. The latency of those models, the speed, the throughput, the computational power of those models, there's a lot of factors involved in doing that. And how can we make those models more efficient? How can we make them more meaningful? How can we derive profitability from those models and do it very quickly? So it's a top level kind of sitting right above there with analytics, data lakes, big data, high performance databases, lots of different functions sitting just below that.
Yeah, very cool. And I'm very intrigued by the background you've got as well, Leslie. It looks like, because I'm a very visual person, I've got my whiteboard over there as well. But when I was interviewing someone, I felt like it was like that scene at a Social Network where it's like they write the code on the window or something, which I always love. And you've got it very, very visual. But I'd love to know, I'd just like to delve into it a little bit more. So you gave a bit of an overview, but if I can just dig a bit deeper, please.
You want to delve into this, or you want to delve into?
I might have to call you up.
Okay.
I'm talking about, so you mentioned code optimization. Looking at it is, so code optimization, machine learning, maybe just delve into a bit more. So we have a very tech audience, so a lot of people are data engineers in our audience and data scientists. But why, if you've got a situation, why is that important? Maybe with what you're doing with Exasol, what is it that really can drive value for it?
Yeah, sure. So look, I can tell you more specifically about what code optimization is. So what it is that it's essentially a way of making the structures, the data structure of code, very, very efficient and optimized. If we think about coders in general, a lot of people do coding. Some coding can be quite repetitive, some can be quite sloppy, some may be, less efficient. And as the code accumulates, in particular for models like deep learning models, right, they could be thousands to tens of thousands of lines, as we've seen. So when people go back into the code, one, how do they understand what's going on? And the second thing is, how do they make that much more efficient? So it's variously looking at using different techniques to make the actual underlying code of whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're building an application or whether you're building an artificial intelligence model, whatever it is that you're doing that's using that, we use our AI techniques to make that very, very advanced and efficient. That is the approach that we have done. And why that is important, as you mentioned, in particular for working with Exasol, is that essentially, look, everybody is getting into the space of machine learning. And as Matthias mentioned, they have their own open architecture for doing that. But what the difference here is to have a dedicated process whereby you can do optimization of people who may have existing models written in existing code, who don't necessarily want to change everything, but they want that far optimized, and they want to do that within memory and not have to leave what they were already doing.
Yeah, got you. Optimization, such an important part to play, making sure that it's, I remember from a marketing background, it'd always be make sure it's like, how to, whether it's SEO or whether it's optimizing your leads or making sure you're qualifying them. There's always that conversation of how can we make it more accurate. But I'd like to come to you, Matthias. So going off what Leslie said there, I'd like to delve what you were going on about and how Exasol is doing great things. How, when you look at high performance analytics, I want to delve into it a little bit more. Why is that important off the back of Leslie's point? So if you look at something, you're using large amounts of data. I read that something like 97% of data is unstructured, and you're using these things, or you might just be throwing them into data lakes, and you must be just storing and storing. I don't know how I want to ask this question. I want to know, why is it so important for high performance analytics, but also how can companies get the most out of that?
So as we discussed before, right, it's really a strategic value lying in the data today. Companies' strategies are now, every company has a data strategy, right? It's super important for their competitive advantage against their competition. Taking better decisions, taking faster decisions is crucial. And with algorithms available today through AI, but also through the existing and the old school analytics or BI reports, or operational BI in many cases, where you take automated decisions across your business, right? From logistic chains to even HR interview processes are analyzed today to optimize the interview results and the hiring quotes or hiring ratios. And that is the reason why data is so central today, and performance is then super important in various ways. So first of all, you want to become a data-led or data-driven company. You want to give access to more and more people. And today, if you do a survey in organizations, everybody talks about the shiny use cases, right? But if you really look into the reality, it's all about constraints. It's all about complexities. There's no self-service available. There's a lot of engineering involved. So I think tools which make it easier, which make it faster and more automated, and then result in more optimized stuff at the very end, these are the drivers for the future, for companies' future success, right? And and then regarding the use cases, a little bit on that end. I think there are three key areas. One is that kind of standard reporting, BI, where more people want to see the data, want to have transparency, what's going on, what effects are done. Secondly, there is that kind of automated decision making. You could call it operational BI, as I mentioned before. And then the third thing is these amazing AI and ML algorithms where you can predict the future, where you can predict what kind of impact change in your pricing model would have, right? And then do that in an integrated way where you can maybe give a CEO access to a BI report, which under the hood is invoking a statistical model. That is bringing the two worlds together.
Yeah, it's very important. And people want more. I remember when I moved from company that wasn't so data driven to a company that was very data driven, and I was like, this is a wake up call. Like, I've got to get everything like ready to go, and they want to see everything. Now, I hadn't considered, like, I didn't see it as important. That's not to say it wasn't important. I just didn't see it as important, but they clearly did, and I soon learned that of how I could. I remember just learning how to use, I think it's Power BI, and I was learning how to use it and how to structure and like for marketing leads and marketing qualification. And I guess you've listed all the benefits. So Matthias, starting with you then to Leslie to see if you kind of, and please bounce off each other if you're on the same page or maybe different ideas. Where we're on this channel at the moment around education, or on this topic around education and making sure people understand the benefits, understand the solutions. If you can clearly communicate that, you'll probably have a better success with the customer. Where is the challenge of getting AI either into a business or getting it across the business? Because I've seen it in big companies where I've said, for example, not necessarily with AI, but they're already using a vendor, but the other half of the company doesn't know they're using a vendor, and I think we've got the same problem that they're already solving across the other side of the business. So it's not the same thing, but I'd love to know what's your point out, or what's your thinking, Matthias first and Leslie, on what is that challenge with getting AI across an organization or getting AI into an organization, whichever way you want to swing it.
Yeah, I think AI and data in particular is both very complex to bring across a whole organization, and that's the reason is because it's involved with many systems, right? You have data silos, you have sometimes silos across departments, like in the culture, in the heads. It's not just technology in many cases. It's really about culture and fostering that. And it's about the data literacy. So many people want to do it, but then they don't really know how to do it. And the last piece of the puzzle, I think, is going maybe one step further. How we could solve that is really to create data success stories, data stories across your company, and explain why a certain thing has made such a big impact to the daily work or to the business, to the revenue. And then I think people will catch up and try to create networks within the company, because I think that is the most restricting factor. It's about that kind of isolation and silos.
Yeah, very important. Leslie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think very similar to what Matthias has just mentioned. So firstly, there's the question for a lot of organizations of what is AI. So think about sections where they have not traditionally been exposed to AI. They're unaware of what it can do for their organization, but they're hearing about it, or their competitors are starting to use it. So the first thing is education of AI, right? What it can do to the organization, how it can benefit the organization. Then there's the aspect of what Matthias touched upon, which I completely agree with, is the siloed effect. And you see that quite often, which is like there needs to be a way that inside of the organization, a top-down approach where it is kind of fed and explained about the benefits of AI, and of course moving and sharing data across different departments within the organization as well. Because often you may find that one organization holds all the key, one department holds all the keys within the organization, and then another department, which is the one that requires a lot of the AI, is finding it very difficult because everything is held. And there's different use cases we have seen in that scenario. For example, in one institution, they were using a very legacy database. And in order to advance and make use of particular queries, a lot of artificial intelligence analytics are based on that. And if you're waiting ridiculous amount of time for a query to be processed, and there's difficulties there because now everybody has this dependency waiting on that particular database and what solutions they can come up with. Whereas, like if you are very savvy and saying, okay, we want to be very AI ready, then you would look at your technology, you would look at your stack and say, okay, we need to have a faster database, for example, in that scenario. And then that allows for easy access. So that's one of those points. And another thing as well, just to highlight, is that right now, AI is taking off. We see that with the share prices of many of the artificial intelligence vendors, so hardware vendors, right? You can see that from NVIDIA, AMD, etc., Intel, and so forth. And what we're seeing is there's a lot of uptake, and the knowledge and the know-how is now involving a lot of data science, and data scientists can be very costly. So another challenge of getting across AI to the organization is it needs to be a cost-effective way where they see the benefit without having to spend so much. And one of those things that we see, as I said, like the more that you get in the product space to augment the capabilities of existing teams and existing AI data scientists, then the more benefit you will see.
Yeah, 100%. And it increases trust as well, right? Being more understanding what's going to happen. Because I think
that's another thing, trust and transparency. Because another challenge is, here's my AI, here's my model, I've got access to it, and I'm building it. What does it do? How does it do it? Why is it doing that? Is it ethical? So there's a lot of questions around that as well. And those are probably going to relate more into making AI more efficient. But yeah, that's a different point.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm all for being open. Like we're an open source platform. Whatever you're doing, I think it's much better to. I always say the classic argument against Android and Apple. I always prefer Android to a degree. Like I use Apple. I'm a Apple fanatic. Well, I'm turning less and less a fanatic. But from using Android, I like their model because they're much more open and they're much more, come in and test our equipment, come and play with it, there's not as many parameters. And I think that leads to innovation. I think it's such an important point. So I wonder, have you seen it with companies trying to, have you seen it with companies that are trying to make this shift from being quite closed and siloed? And I guess the pandemic changed, or the digital movement changed a lot of it in the past 2 years. But how have you seen, or have you got any tips on how companies have made that transition from being quite siloed to all of a sudden being, we're an open book? Like, what do you think?
So I don't want to do a pitch, but Exasol is a very good example of that openness, because we have created that proprietary database core, right? But then on top, we have developed now more than 100 open source projects to integrate and extend Exasol, right? Because the data ecosystems become more and more complex, and so many new technologies pop up, like AI. Leslie, how many companies are popping up every week? It's crazy, right? And customers they don't want to have one vendor with one big suite. It's not working anymore, right? 20 years ago, you were buying from Oracle or Microsoft, and then you had the full suite. Today, with AWS has 66,000 ISVs on their platform.
That's a lot.
And the cloud makes it easier. The technology makes it easier. The REST APIs, the microservices, the software as a service model makes it so easy to connect best of breed technologies and don't get depending on one of these or a couple of these technologies. And then you put them together, integrate them into a great solution. That's the reason why we opted to go that open source route, I think 6, 7, 8 years ago already. And it played off. It made us more scalable, more agile. You don't need to wait for the next software release. You simply, and that's exactly what we did in the partnership with TurinTech, right? We created a GitHub repository, and then we integrated their code, their AutoML, and Leslie will probably elaborate on how exciting that AutoML functionality is onto Exasol.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I think Matthias answered that actually very comprehensively. I would just say that we are seeing an ecosystem where a lot of these vendors now, we can all coexist, right? Because as Matthias mentioned, it's not a case that either Oracle or Microsoft is one fits all and they do everything. What we're seeing right now is that we're seeing a lot of startups, particularly in the AI space, that are emerging, that are solving very specific individualized use cases that are overlapping with one another. So, a company that does model generation may not be the same as a company that does model deployment, right? But whereas before, maybe Microsoft would have tried to take the entire end-to-end of doing that and may not have been as successful as these separate entities and companies that are working on that specific use case only.
Yeah. Very cool to see all the, because I always see it, the new companies that are popping up, and like you said, to solve a very niche situation or a niche problem, and they end up getting bought out by someone bigger usually, but because they just want to integrate it into their technology stack and just think, well, we're not rebranding, we'll just keep you in we'll just take your technology and build it into what we're doing. But I think I'd love to know that's kind of made me think. What's your thinking, Matthias and Leslie? Like, a bit separate to the conversation, but what do you think on the future of advanced analytics and what you're talking about? Because I'm seeing so many trends. Like, RPA used to be the real hot technology, and now I have conversation, they're like, yeah, RPA is old, and I'm just like, oh, it's all moved to intelligent automation. I'm like, it's not even that old. Like, it was only, in my opinion, from what I've read, and I wasn't even in the industry by this point, but 6-7 years ago, everyone was really starting to utilize what I see as screen recording technology. But to use that as an example, is there anything you're spotting with technologies that are coming through that are helping your companies or helping your customers, or you're utilizing, or you're seeing advanced analytics really make a shift? Matthias?
To the point I discussed before, I think one clear trend is making it easier to use, right?
Yeah.
That sometimes even managers can create their models on their own.
Yeah.
So I think everything which goes into that direction is the future. Making it less complicated and frictionless, so to speak, to really leverage the power of these algorithms and apply it to data. There is a huge trend if you look at all the libraries and even new languages popping up and being developed sometimes at universities or at big companies, right? And they jointly work on that. Every now and then, completely new kind of dimensions, levels of statistical libraries, which blow us away, right?
Yeah.
If you think 10 years ago, what kind of applications could have been done, I think that will continue. The third section is that hardware thing Leslie mentioned, right?
Yeah.
With more sophisticated hardware, you can do simply more. So the AI models today couldn't have been executed 20 years ago on hardware. And then if you combine that with these interesting areas like the code optimization Leslie mentioned, right? If you can save CPU power or main memory consumption on that automated style, then you can reach more and more. You can analyze more and more data. You can become more accurate with your models, and then you can create completely new applications. So I'm super excited about that future, right?
Yeah, sounds awesome. I was thinking like how you, I was on a conversation yesterday or last week. I was doing one on LinkedIn Lives, and I was saying how long people were going down the wrong route because they didn't have machine learning to tell them they were going down the wrong route. And that's why I'm such a big fan of it, because it's patterns. You can learn the patterns very quickly. Fair enough, you might get a new piece of data in the mix, like the pandemic. I'm sure that shifted everyone's predictions, but you can see from the shift and you think, God, imagine running a business in 1970. Like, you'd be going off gut instinct. Like, maybe you've got the figures and it's all paper based. You just think, oh, we've got it so good now. Like, how quickly we can make a decision, how quick. But Leslie, I don't know if you what you think, so if you've got input on.
Yeah, sure. I think I can back up what Matthias said, and just touching upon that, so we feel that the way things are moving right now is with the advent of new hardware. AI is only going to get much better.
Yeah.
And what we're looking at is more in terms of optimization, and optimization in different areas. So for instance, like right now, computational costs for analytics is, very, very high. So if you want to get very, very accurate models, they will cost a substantial amount in terms of energy consumption, in terms of usage, and especially on the cloud, where this could be quite costly. So actually, what we're going to be looking at in the future is how to make those same advanced decisions, but make them quicker and more efficiently and cost effectively. So this taps in very much part of the ESG that we're seeing running around at the moment, in the domain. Another thing as well, I think that as a lot of analytics is now kind of customized and tailored, we're going to see more and more providers and solutions in that space that sit on top of what potentially TurinTech or Exasol can do, and advance those even further, right? So in the code optimization space, this is a lot of more about data structuring and rewriting, and this is more about how do we make the code more efficient. And in the AI space, we're going to see how that translates, in the sense that as a lot of the models use code and the code is further optimized, and then they become more energy efficient code, and then you get near close to the accuracy that you're looking for, then you will have hardware-based optimization, which is basically people who want to do optimization using the actual hardware that they're doing, and how they will be doing energy saving, memory saving, CPU hardware optimization as well. So everything in the space of artificial intelligence for advanced analytics is going more into this area of optimization.
Yeah, such a cool point as well. It always reminds me of how many avenues we could potentially go down in like 10, 15 years. I mean, I always think there's what's his name, Brian Cox, and he always mentions about how if you try and picture how many galaxies there are out there, it's like 2 trillion. Like try and pick, and that's just ones we know about. So try and picture that in your head. It's impossible. Like you can't even try and quantify how many things that is. And it's the same thing with AI, same thing with cloud, and same thing with analytics. The amount of things we can analyze, and especially with the metaverse coming, which apparently is going to be the website or what do you call it, the internet 10 times over. Like it's gonna be 10 times bigger, 10 times better. And I mean, it's just crazy to think around it. But a key thing that I want to look at, and Leslie, I think it would be good to ask you the question, is if you're collecting all this data and you're making better analytics on it, how important is explainability? How much impact can it have to a business? So fair enough, you're getting all this. How can companies make the most out of it, and how can they have it so they can make it make sense to people who you've got traditional businesses where the CEOs and the C-suite aren't the people that have learned about data science or done maths or done any of these things that might come under it. How important is it, and why is it important for explainability?
Yeah, sure. So look, in particular with ourselves, we had built a fully transparent platform from the ground up, right? Doesn't lock in any customers and provides the code so that they can take it and understand it and use it. That's one part of it, right? Is being able to give potential customers or users access to the code so that they can edit, change, and deploy how they see fit. The second part of it, of course, is the explanation of what those models are doing, right? So in that space, what we're seeing is that even for a very talented data scientist, if it's not a specific type of machine learning knowledge that he has. So for example, let's say this is a data scientist who specializes in graph embeddings, and now he's using, let's say he's using semi-supervised learning approach for some sort of predictions of something handwritten. And maybe the explainability with what he's trying to do is different to the explainability of how he's understood it.
Yeah.
And then when the documentation is then written up, it's difficult for other users to come and read that and understand what is going on if the lead data scientist who was working on that particular model actually understood what it was trying to do, but because he lacked the domain knowledge, it's difficult to kind of convey that into words. And so you have a knock-on effect, right? So this is one of those great challenges right now that we're seeing. However, when you have a universal product that basically has at most thousands of models easily available, and models that may be open source, taken in and then improved further, and now you have a way that when a model is used, that immediately there's an explanation that has been past recorded historically that comes along with the model. And almost like a tree function, as you're using more and more different models, the explanation follows very nicely as if it's like an API doc, right? So it reads very easily, and that is where we're getting more and more into in terms of the transparency and the explainability, which is a big thing, because banks, financial institutions, if they don't understand what you're doing, if they don't understand the model, they're not going to use it. And think about, in particular, banks. They require a fraud model. Every bank requires a fraud model. You can't turn around and tell them this model works really well, but we don't understand how it's going to work. They won't accept it, even if it works really well.
Yeah.
I would have a follow-up question, Leslie. Isn't that even more complex because many data scientists? I mean, you have a PhD, right? You're really the expert. You create a software around data science, but isn't there for one really good data scientist at least 3-4 of kind of copy and paste data scientists who apply the algorithms, who kind of understand what they are doing, but they are not really understanding the theory behind it?
That's a good point. Look, that's quite normal, right? In that's what we're seeing, that there are a lot of them are not going to understand the theory behind it. It's AI and model generation, model development, model optimization is a very, very wide field right now. And there are different parts to it. So the understanding and the theoretical aspects of it to application is very complex indeed.
Yeah. It's a really important point as well, what you raised, Matthias, about people just doing it without actually not knowing the reason why they're doing it or what the kind of impact is. I couldn't picture a bank just turning around, well, you should trust us because we've always done this, we've always done it this way, and this is how we're going to continue to do it. It's like one of those key warning lessons about a company leader. It's just like, like run for the hills if you hear that kind of language coming out. But I get, Matthias, I'd like to come to you because I read that you've done a report on climate change recently. What was it, back in October, so a few months, 6, 7, 8 months ago. And that looked to me about explainability, because that was around, you said 85% of consumers have changed their mind about buying because of climate change in action. Is that all powered by analytics? Talk us through that. How does that work with like everyone changing their minds on certain topics and certain buying habits? Is that through companies using analytics and realizing and displaying it back to them through explaining the model, as Leslie went into, or is it someone else?
Yeah, I think that's kind of trends of society, right? And sometimes you can't really explain that even with the best algorithms and models. Sometimes there's trends like, if you look at social media, right, or these kind of viral videos which are going across, and then you change behavior, you change opinions, and I think in that case, everybody is simply understanding that kind of thing is getting more and more important. That's changing buying behaviors, and I think in certain things you can try to influence it, or you can try to catch up and try to analyze what's going on. Sometimes, and probably mostly, you're too late, and you're looking at the history and not really grasping the trend in real time. But the more and more close you are to these data trends, and you're analyzing the data constantly, the better you can take decisions as a company. And I think that is a very good point you're raising. It's like being as close as possible with your audience, with your customers, with your users, right?
Yeah, to get the best customer experience. Everyone wants things quick to their preferences, and they want it next day, thanks to Amazon. I always think
ideally you know what they want before they even recognize it themselves, right?
Exactly. What was it? Henry Ford and Steve Jobs, both people, they came up with products, and I think Henry Ford said, if I asked people what they wanted, they'd say faster horses. So that kind of shows, like, sometimes it is best to take that initiative. But that's crazy, because you do, I read that you do 3 billion rows of data in 3 seconds. How? That's like, how can you do that?
Yeah, that's in memory. If you really leverage the power of memory, if you have to compare, typical software code is built for disk-based access, for block-wise processing, and if you access a data cell in the main memory, it's 50,000 times faster compared to accessing a block on the disk, right? So if you recreate the software code, you really have to rethink every algorithm you apply, because you have to do it differently. Take data compression. If you want to compress data, typically you do that blockwise. So if you then decompress if you want to access a decompressed element, you have to decompress the whole block just for accessing one single cell, right? And then if you do that in memory, you can have a random access. So software code has to be thought completely from scratch, and that's why not too many in-memory software vendors exist in the market, and that's why we have that competitive advantage.
Yeah. You should have framed it, Matthias. You should have said, well, that's just as many as I can do, but other people have done 5 billion in 2 seconds. But it's impressive to see that you can do that. It's really cool. And I guess if you look at it that way, I always come to it, and I'm not trying to veer off here, but I always try and bring anyone that we have on to the educational standpoint, because that's why we exist, right? Or it's why the AI Journal exists, to educate people on people that might not know about data, cloud, IoT, smart solutions, edge computing, whatever it might be. Do you think there's something, I don't want to say be done, because that's a very open-ended question that we could delve into for hours and hours, but do you see roles of the data science team or a data developer team changing going forward, and to change to all these new ways that data can be collected? Because Leslie, you were touching on it, and you touched on it as well, Matthias, how important it is doing things for the sake of doing it. And it really, if you don't let them learn or take risk or learn a model or try and tweak a model, and that's just from my angle, I'm sure you can delve into it more, but do you think the role of data science team is evolving, and how can it be better implemented into a company, I guess?
Yeah, sure. So if I can, hello?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, sure. If I can answer that. So basically, yeah, like I feel that before data scientists, what did you have, right? You had computer scientists,
Yeah.
you had mathematicians, you had statisticians.
Yeah.
Then you ended up in the finance area with quants. Then you ended up with quant developers. Then you ended up with big data specialists. And now you ended up with, now you have data scientists. So it's kind of like the amalgamation of everything,
Yeah.
all of those particular roles. Now, data scientists at this present moment in time have always been contending with working with data and developing models. And what's happening now is, as you get more products in that space, data scientist roles evolve to, it's not going to take them many months to build one model, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be able to build lots and lots of models, hundreds, maybe thousands within weeks or within the same time frame. And in particular, they're now going to have to learn to use very different types of integration software. So for example, fast high performance databases, advanced feature stores, right? Different forms of data warehousing. And you have a whole data journey. So of course, I definitely see the role of a data scientist evolving, and hence how they operate within the organization. The other thing to see is, like, right now, data scientists are kind of embedded within companies, right? So you'll find a data science team inside of an organization, and they kind of work to solve problems across the organization. What we're going to see is loads of data scientists. We're going to see analysts. We're going to see IT technology professionals, software developers becoming data scientists, because it's going to be very readily available.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, we will see individual teams having at least 1 to 2 data scientists. So it will be much more spanned across the organization. I mean, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. What do you think, Matthias?
I can only agree. I think you explained it very well. It's really about, it's such a multifaceted job, right? Today, data scientist. It's not just a mathematical expert. It's not just an engineer who's connecting or curating data, which is probably more than 50% of a job, right? And then creating the models. It's really about translating into the business. And so I think in the future, these embedded experts, so to speak, will become business analysts and the translators, and really important roles in an organization, because they will, with analyzing and understanding the data and visualizing it and then taking decisions for the business, they will be the drivers of the future, right? And they will come up with insights which nobody was even thinking of, or creating new even business models. So I think it's if we can educate people better, and it doesn't need to be just the technical details. It's really about that business education and the domain knowledge. Then I think it's crazy what you can achieve with data science.
Yeah, and it's important, isn't it, to companies are seeing as important, bringing in citizen developers, right? Because they want to make sure that everyone's got that access to that kind of angle or that kind of learning, or learning about data, or learning to a degree, a high enough standard that they can be on the same page as the business, not walking in and thinking one of those classic things like speaking plain English, like I don't understand you. So they kind of know the lingo or know what they're on about. I think it's such an important point, and it's something I'll be talking about as well. If anyone's joining at AI Summit in London, it'll be a very important point, speaking with the UK Ministry of Defence and a few others. So join along to that, because that's exactly on that topic. Self-plugging myself quickly there.
Actually, I think I'm speaking at the same summit as well. Yeah.
Well, Leslie, we should go for a drink, man, and go for a coffee.
We can all meet up, and yeah, definitely.
You gonna be there, Matthias?
No, not really. But maybe if you invite me to a drink, I might consider.
drink first, right? Yeah, of course.
What you meant to say was you weren't joining before this call, and now you definitely are joining.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, with education, it's such an important point. So I always look at it as thinking, do you have any tips to companies that are maybe to like finish us off here, or tips, recommendations, or starting points for companies that are maybe going on that kind of AI roadmap, trying to get themselves on there? I always ask this question, and it's great to see all the varying answers we get, and obviously plug it into any angle you want, Leslie and Matthias. But is there anything you'd recommend to them when they're trying to embed AI, or they're trying to embed a data process, maybe? Because most people don't even think about embedding AI before your data's in order. So please kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, I have a particular take on that. I mean, look, the thing is, I think partnerships, integrations are very key. And that's what, in particular, if you're talking about AI company, that's what they should be looking at. For example, our own partnership to speak of, TurinTech and Exasol's partnership. So I just wanted to touch upon that, which is that Exasol for us is the fastest database, right? And high performance analytics database. Yeah. And we're an advanced code optimization company specializing in machine learning, amongst other things. So the combination of that provides a very bespoke solution, whereby a lot of the models are now even more faster, and they can be stored and generated, and the output taken very quickly. So for companies, much like what you're mentioning, it's again like, we don't want to have companies in that space that are siloed from each other. There are a number of different AI companies, and they can partner and integrate with the likes of us in different areas to see how we can improve particular AI processes within an organization. That's what I wanted to mention.
Yeah, I love it.
I would come from a little bit of a different angle in companies. I think you have to create these kind of programs to nurture. It's all about nurturing, right? It's about nurturing skills. It's about nurturing culture. You need the backing of top level executives. I think that's always super helpful. Not necessary, but helpful. And then I would recommend to think about the whole area of data ownership. Right. What Leslie mentioned before, these silos where people are not talking with each other or not giving access to each other. And then the central engineering team, which are responsible for the data streams and data factories, right? If we could achieve in organizations that business departments become more responsible for their data and then connect that all together, I think we would come a big jump forward.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I always try to think of it as a grassroots level as well, to try and build that separate to what you're both talking about. But it's something I always try and push through, to think if you can kind of encompass it from a, like, I don't think there's enough being done in universities necessarily, because when I was last at the AI Summit, they were like, how the hell are we going to get people into data science roles if there's not enough going for it? And I was generally being grilled on the question. I was like, I don't know, like, I've got my ideas, but how viable they are, I don't know. About a year ago. But I think that's some brilliant points you've made, Matthias and Leslie, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us. To everyone watching, if you want to reach out to Leslie and Matthias, I'd definitely encourage you to do so. Both of them have free tools that you can use, so you can try their tools for free by going onto the website. And they've both got a number of great they've both got research arms to them. You can find out about the industries they're in, who they're trusted by, and it's a brilliant way to see what you're doing. And you really open my eyes up to how much data we can analyze and how important it is to make sure it's trustful data, make sure we're using it properly, and all the other things we discussed. But Leslie, Matthias, really appreciate you joining today, and thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Awesome. Looking forward to the next one. And to audience joining us, as always, let us know if there's anything we can do to bring the right people on that you want to learn about a certain topic, whether it's cloud or in this case with data and code optimization. And for me, I could keep talking for hours and hours, but we'd definitely recommend that you reach out to them, and look forward to joining you all again on the next one whenever we do that. I think we've got one scheduled for tomorrow and one scheduled for next Tuesday. So looking forward to that. And again, thank you for joining us, Leslie and Matthias.